As the sun sets over California, you can't believe you're here. Sitting on a patch of grass, surrounded by the world's brightest minds in space technology. You peer down the hill, and there it is. SpaceX Falcon 9. Its payload, 24 satellites to be released into Earth's orbit. But will it succeed? There's no guarantee. As the countdown commences, you feel the rocket before you hear it. Liquid oxygen and kerosene ignite. You hold your breath. A $62 million research investment is on the line. For someone from country Victoria with a passion for arts and drama, you think, how did I get here?
Kaylee Verrier grew up in Sale, Victoria. She has a passion for cooking, hiking, sport and making clay jewellery. She also works in Space Command for the Royal Australian Air Force as an aeronautical engineer, and we just got a glimpse into her mind as she witnessed the incredible SpaceX Falcon 9 launch. I'm your host, Nick Musgrove. I'm a film and TV writer, and this is How Did I Get Here, a podcast about incredible stories in the ADF. So, how did the girl from Gippsland find herself working at an elite US Space Force base? Let's find out. Kaylee, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Glad to be here.
So great to have you here. I am so fascinated. Space Command, that sounds like the stuff of a kid's dream. Is it?
It absolutely is, yeah. It's a great place to work and I have the best job in the world.
So how does Space Command fit into the Defence Force? I thought the ADF was just Army, Navy and Air Force.
So in the ADF we have 5 operational domains. They are the air domain, land domain, maritime domain, and then cyber and space.
Okay, so Air Force is obviously air domain, Army is land, Navy would be maritime, cyber is, I'm guessing, cyber security?
Yeah, correct.
And you're in Space Command, the coolest title there is.
Yeah.
What is your role within Space Command?
So the job title itself is SO3 Space International Exercises. What that means is that I work within the Space Force generation area to design and execute space exercises, which are used to train our force in what space is and how to operate.
And what sort of stuff are you keeping an eye on up in space?
So we're keeping an eye on pretty much everything there is. There are thousands of satellites up there, and we use a whole array of ground-based sensors to track what's in orbit so that we can make sure that everything stays safe.
So satellites are up there,
Mm-hmm.
debris as well from rockets and other machinery that's been in space?
Yeah, absolutely. So tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands pieces of debris are up there. They come from satellite collisions that occur accidentally, and then you have existing satellites that just fall apart because they're old, and that's just what happens to some systems. You've got rocket bodies, which if you use a rocket to launch your satellites into orbit and then they stay up there, they become a piece of debris themselves as well.
I'm interested also in how you got into such an extraordinary role. So were you always interested in space technology?
Yeah, I think so. I always had a fascination of anything beyond the world. Like I loved the idea of the stars and the planets as a little kid. That became studying astrophysics in high school as well. And then as soon as I found an ability to specialise my undergraduate degree in space engineering, I took that chance and studied orbital mechanics and space situational awareness.
What do you think captured you as a kid about space? Was it the possibilities? Was it the physics? Was it movies about space?
Oh, it was everything. It was the physics, I think. My earliest memory of fascination is watching documentaries on stars and how they're born and created and how they die, but more importantly how they're like some of the most powerful events in the world, and they create planets and they destroy planets, and I just thought that was the best thing ever.
Just hearing your passion for it, it's absolutely contagious. Talk me through your personality more generally as a kid. How would you describe yourself?
I was the kind of kid that was very curious and interested in everything. I did everything. I have done most sports you can probably think of. I did surf lifesaving, I did ballet, I did taekwondo, I did basketball and netball and soccer and everything else. I did music, I was in 3 different bands, I did drama, I did cooking.
It strikes me that you had a real urge growing up to just fit in as much as you could into your life. Do you think that's one of the reasons the ADF then appealed to you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think I've been saying since I was a little kid that one life is not enough for me and like, I'm never going to be able to achieve the 100,000 things I want to, but I'm going to give it a red hot crack. And just seeing the opportunities that the military offered was outstanding. It combined my academic pursuits with also the love of fitness, and it gets you outdoors and it helps you travel, and it opened the doors to just so many endless adventures. So I think it worked perfectly for my personality.
You clearly could have chosen so many different paths. As you say, you could really do with about 100 lifetimes to put all your passions into full effect. But why and how did you end up landing on the ADF?
That's a great question. It's kind of funny because I've always said that I didn't consciously think about joining the military for a long time. Ironic given my family are military, but it wasn't really something at the forefront of my mind until like year 11 or 12 I was studying, and I had a join ADF advertisement come on, I think like YouTube, and I was looking up something to do with maths. And I was like, yeah, actually, why not? Let's have a look into it. Let's see what's there. And initially it started with the idea of going to ADFA because I loved the idea of having a degree that I didn't have to pay for. So going to university for me was a no-brainer, and just finding what I wanted to do at uni was what I was trying to figure out. But the more I started to learn about what the ADF offered after that degree, the more I fell in love with it. And it went from being a academic pursuit to being a career that I really wanted to have for the rest of my life. So it didn't start as a sudden, I want to be in the military, but once I got there, I knew I was in the right place.
If I look at your qualifications, it is a frightening list. I've had to write it all down, so if you'll excuse me. Through the Australian Defence Force Academy, ADFA, University of New South Wales, and I don't think this is even an exhaustive list. It's exhausting to read, mind you. You have a Bachelor of Aeronautical Engineering with honours, a Masters of Space Engineering, a Masters of Space Operations, and certifications in things like scramjet design, launch vehicle design, and you're currently, just for fun, undertaking a certification in French. How did I do?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate.
Did you do all of this, firstly, through ADFA?
Through defence in various forms, yes. So the bachelor's degree, so my aeronautical engineering was through ADFA as a training officer. That was my 4 years with them. And both of the master's degrees were done by UNSW ADFA as well. But they were both done like part-time as a postgraduate.
Whilst full-time with the Air Force?
Whilst full-time working, yeah. But everything has been funded by Defence in one way or another, which is great.
So let's talk help debt.
Nothing.
It's a zero.
It's a zero, yeah.
That's one hell of a help debt. Now, I'm really interested in what life would be like at ADFA. Talk me through life as a student.
ADFA itself is a 3-year adventure. And then members such as engineers who do honours years, you just stay there for a 4th year. But you're not a trainee in that 4th year. You still graduate with your cohort. You throw your hat up, you promote, and then you stick around for a 4th year, which is really fun.
So what's the balance between study and training?
It really depends on the degree you're doing. So as an engineer, it was honestly pretty tricky, but it's a small cohort and you're all in the same struggle together. And so the relationships that you build with your other members in engineering really get you through it, which is great.
Moving now to one of the things you studied, which is launch vehicle design. I'm curious as to whether when you were at the Vandenberg Space Force Base watching the SpaceX launch, did you have some unique and rare insights into what was happening as opposed to, say, everybody else tuning in online?
Yeah, potentially. I actually worked in launch management in my previous job as well. So I had a little bit of a background, and some of the subjects that I studied in my master's degree overlap with launch engineering as well. And so I think the most exciting part was you can watch the live video countdowns and they start to talk about the different systems that are switching on. And I'm like, I actually know what that is. I know what that means. And that's a really exciting thought to have.
Now, another topic that you have studied is scramjets. It's going to be a real challenge for you. You're going to have to explain this to me like I'm 5. It's probably about the right level of aptitude. What is a scramjet?
All right, so scramjets refer to a hypersonic engine. So your standard aircraft that you fly on, they have the big turbojet engines. They are shaped very specifically for the speeds that they fly at. And the faster the aircraft goes, the more you have to change the shape of that engine to be able to operate at the speed. So scramjets are made specifically for hypersonic flight, so that's going what we call Mach 5 or 5 times the speed of sound. So way faster than what any standard aircraft would fly at. And they're just a very specific engine designed to allow a vehicle to actually operate at those speeds properly.
Now, all of these qualifications and academic pursuits would no doubt have unlocked some incredible on-the-job roles within the ADF day-to-day. Tell us about your first posting when you left ADFA.
Yeah, so my first job was down in Adelaide at a unit called Air Warfare Engineering Squadron, and that was fantastic. So I posted in initially kind of as a graduate engineer, but then the unit adopted me. They liked my engineering talents and they needed more engineers, and so they kept me for the whole 3 years, which was fantastic. And so I did a couple different jobs, primarily around aeromechanical design engineering, but I also got to work in flight safety engineering and launch management, which is around launch vehicles.
So when you say the engineering component, are you working on design? Are you sort of building things more physically?
Yeah, so in the aeromechanical side of things, we were design engineers, yes. So we have our design engineering qualifications that we obtain whilst we work there, and that was effectively someone in defence could come to you with a problem and it was your job to design a solution. So that was textbook engineering. Like, we actually have our textbooks from university on the tables, and you draw out a design, you do a what we call a CAD model, which is your 3D models on the computer. You pick a material, you run some analysis to see if it works, and then we get them manufactured through Defence Science Technology Group, which is a separate defence organisation that is full of science and engineering experts. So they manufacture it for us, and then we flight test it to see if it works.
Sounds like such a wonderful coming together of the academic and the technical with the practical. Like, is that exciting for you?
It was, even more so because nobody told me we had that in defence. And so I had never heard of air warfare engineering until I walked in the door on my first day. So it was so exciting to find that there was the job that I wanted right there in front of me, and it was real engineering work.
And in terms of your role right now, is there still some of that real engineering work?
So what I do now is more in operational planning, but I have found my background in space engineering has been really, really helpful, because when I'm creating some of the exercise processes, I understand how the satellites are going to operate, and I can design scenarios about where launch vehicles might go and their different trajectories and what we're going to do on orbit. And so even though it's an operational planning role and not an engineering one, my background has helped immensely.
Does Space Command do joint training exercises when you're building these exercises with, say, the Army and the Navy?
Yeah, we do some. So there's kind of the two different areas of exercises that I work on. They're either space domain exercises for a space audience, or you've got space contributions into the joint exercises. So things like Pitch Black happened recently. That's a major air domain exercise done out of Darwin. Heaps of countries participate, thousands of aircraft go up there, and one of my jobs this year was taking a small space component to integrate space into air as well. And we do that with things like Talisman Sabre as well, which is a fairly well-known exercise done up in Northern Australia, and that's very joint. You have a lot of Navy assets, a lot of Army involved, air as well.
Why do you do these exercises, Kaylee?
Exercises exist to train people for the jobs that they're in. And so the whole purpose of making exercises is to give people an opportunity to train for their job in a real-world environment, especially field exercises where you can get Army members out with boots on the ground and you can get pilots flying their aircraft. It's all there so that they can practice the jobs that they're actually in and practice them together. Because a lot of the time when you're in your job, you do it in isolation, and that's not the best way to learn. So when we have these joint exercises, you can do your job and see how it's affecting the other people out there as well.
Kaylee, you also write academic articles and give talks. You even wrote a chapter on a book regarding space ethics. What are the basics of space ethics?
Ooh, great question. Military ethics in itself is a topic that I always found really interesting. It covers the ethics of going into a war, so the ethical decisions of starting a war, which can sound a little counterproductive, but that's why we have it, right? You can't just start a war for the sake of it. You have to have a legal, moral basis. And it also carries into what you do during war or during conflicts, and then also what you do afterwards to try and stop it from ever happening again. And then military space ethics just takes that same military ethics approach and puts it into, well, what about when space gets involved? Does that change anything? Should it change anything?
I can see, though, again, how that sort of slightly academic perspective becomes very practical in terms of a decision-making process. So I can see, again, why you're really drawn to it. Also, at the Vandenberg Space Force Base, you were responsible for planning the RDF's participation in a space domain awareness exercise called Global Sentinel. What was it and what was involved?
Yeah, so I won't claim solo responsibility
Claim it,
for that.
go
I do.
for it.
I have a team, and by team I mean there's me and one other, and we designed it together. But yeah, we both work in the exercise cell and created the Australian participation in that. It's probably one of the most fun times I've had in my career so far. It was absolutely incredible. So Global Sentinel has been around for a while, and it brings together a whole bunch of nations. So we had 28 different countries participating in this exercise. And effectively, it's all about training the space domain awareness capabilities, which means learning how to use different sensors to look up and then understand what you're actually seeing. There's a lot of nuances to not just being able to see the satellites, but understand what they're doing, where are they going, are they still healthy, are they moving as we expect, and all that kind of information. And so the benefit of Global Sentinel is you practice these things with all the other nations to try and get on the same page and understand each other. And so some countries with more experience, like the US, who have a major space program, can provide all of their insights and lessons learned into the more junior nations that are just kind of finding their feet in the space domain as well. So it's a great opportunity. It was a lot of fun, and it is unclassified, which makes it really easy to work together.
When you're tracking a satellite, Kaylee, and it isn't performing as it's expected to, and it may be coming towards, in your words, it's sort of end of life, what do you do?
It really depends on where it is and what it's doing. And that's why it's so important to track them, because you want to know if it is coming towards its end of life, is it going to be a safe end of life? And so when you launch satellites, they generally have to come with a 25-year plan of how you're going to remove it from the orbit so it's not in the way of other satellites in the future. And so quite often, what we call low Earth orbit is the more popular regime. And when you're tracking them and they're coming towards their end of life, you want to make sure that they're actually coming closer into the Earth's surface so they get dragged into the atmosphere and then they burn up and they don't become debris. They don't risk damaging any other satellites out there. And so being able to track the behaviour of it and then forward plan what it's going to do is really important to making sure that it is going to be safe and it's not going to accidentally threaten something else out there.
Has there ever been an instance where either a satellite or other debris has posed a risk on the surface, or are we safe that it will burn up in the atmosphere if it can get into that zone?
Yeah, usually they burn up, but absolutely there have been risks and there have been impacts on the Earth. I don't have the case studies off the top of my head, but there's been bits of like Starlink satellites which have landed in Australian territories before. There have been other larger satellites which have re-entered and they're just too big to burn up in the atmosphere. And that's where the tracking becomes even more important, because if it's not going to burn up, then you need to know where is it going to go, and do we need to like get people away from it, or is it just going to land in the ocean? Is there any flow-on effects from this required?
Growing up in Sale, I imagine there weren't heaps of people who are necessarily in any small town as passionate as you are about a very niche thing in space or physics. Going to the ADF, is it just an incredible feeling to find like-minded people who you could trade notes with, who also look up maths on YouTube?
Yes, absolutely. It has been amazing. I didn't really know any engineers. I didn't know much at all about what engineering was or where it could take you and what the pathways were. And when I joined the military, and when I joined specifically as an engineer, it was like I finally found my place in this world. And I've had that moment re-hit me multiple times over the last couple of years, where I'm sitting around people that love space and have studied rockets as well, or work with satellite design and have this same passion and drive and this genuine curiosity about the world. And I feel so good, because I'm like, these are my people, and I'm like, this is it, this is where I'm supposed to be. And finding that is just the best feeling in the world.
And at Vandenberg Space Force Base, that must have been that feeling on a whole new level, because these are the best and brightest minds from all around the world.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the best things about it, was seeing that there's people from all sorts of different countries that speak different languages, and yet the one thing we all had in common was this passion and this interest in space. Like I was speaking to engineers from Italy and from the Netherlands, and they all at the base knowledge have this same drive and passion for space engineering, and they all work in the same area. And it's just like, it doesn't matter if our language isn't the same, like the rest of us is.
Okay, Kaylee, let's get to the explosive and indeed propulsive conclusion to the SpaceX launch. You've gathered with professional peers, as you've said, from 28 nations worldwide to watch the launch of the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket. Now, days earlier, as I understand, that same launch was scrubbed due to bad weather, but this time around, it's reached the 10-second mark. Talk us through what happens then.
Yeah, absolutely. So Vandenberg is well renowned for its weather. It's got what we call the Vandenberg fog. It's these beautiful rolling hills on the side of the ocean, but that means that you get a lot of fog that comes in, which means the rockets get scrubbed. Yeah, it was a night a couple of days ago. We'd all been out there watching this rocket, waiting for this countdown to go off, just to have the security guard walk up and be like, sorry guys, it's scrubbed. But then I think 2 days later we were told that they were re-going for the launch in the middle of the day, and we drove down the road to this gravel park which kind of sits over the top of the hill and has the best view of the launch pads, and you can only get to there if you're on the base too. So we were very lucky to be in the right place at the right time. And then it finally hits that 10-second countdown. You don't scrub once you hit that 10-second countdown.
All right, so at 10 it's happening?
Yeah. Rockets are a little bit different, but usually about the 90-second mark, because it comes down to the internal systems that you've switched on. So once you turn to internal power, then you can't necessarily scrub as easily as you can if you're still attached. And then the lower you get on that countdown, the more unlikely it is that you will scrub. And so you've got all these opportunities to stop. If something's not right, then you just stop it and you call it off. But once you hit that 10-second countdown, that's all internal, all automatic. It's been handed over to the rocket now. The people are out of the loop. So you know it's going ahead, which is great.
So the moment of liftoff, talk us through. Is it smoke? Is the first thing you see smoke, or is it flame? What do you see?
It's just like what you see in the movies. You get that big rolling smoke that comes up from the bottom of it, and then the rocket slowly lifts up, and then you get the flames underneath it. And because you're so far away, you see it first, and then you start to feel the vibration through the ground, and then you feel the shockwave, and then you hear it. And it's just incredible, because you get this visual cue to start with, and then your whole body starts to feel it, and then the sound hits you, and it's always louder than you think it's going to be. Yeah, it's amazing.
How loud is it? So it's really reverberating through you?
Oh yeah. It's very loud. At the maximum sound, you're yelling at the person standing right next to you. So it's pretty loud.
And how far away do you think you are for it to be so loud?
We were still I would say a couple kilometres. The safety margins are huge. And we were up on a hill, which is why the vantage point was so good, but still a few kilometres away. But they're big rockets, they're very loud.
And how did everybody react at the moment of liftoff when it was
We were so
airborne?
excited. People were cheering, people were clapping. It was so exciting because all of us work in space, but most of our countries don't do our own space launch, and so you don't get to see that kind of thing in most of our home countries. And so for almost all of us, it was the first rocket launch we get to see with our own eyes, and it was just amazing.
Did it hit home in that moment how far you'd come in just 8 years?
It was pretty incredible. I remember pinching myself a little bit. I'm like, if you go back, 8 years, and I was finishing year 12 wondering what on earth I was going to be doing with my life. I'm like, if you had told, 17-year-old Kaylee that she was going to be standing in California watching a space rocket take off only 8 years down the track, I would have been like, no way. How would I get there? I don't see how that's plausible at all. And yet there I was with some great friends around me and all these like-minded people, and it was just incredible.
Now, you actually, and this would surprise nobody listening at home, actually won an award from the University of New South Wales entitled the Women in Engineering Award, Outstanding Achievement in Early Career. Talk me through the moment you won that award.
Oh, yes. So they actually, they called me to notify me that I had won, and I had not even heard of this award. I wasn't aware of it. And so when they called to be like, hey, we're going to organise your flights, I was like, what do you mean? And I was absolutely overwhelmed. I couldn't believe that, me, I had been chosen for something. It really blew me away. Ended up calling my partner and my mum and everything. I was like, you won't believe this. And they're all like, yeah, we believe it. Yeah.
What would you say to young Kaylee if you could pass on a message to your younger self?
I'd say to stick with it, hey. So growing up, my mum used to always tell us that everything happens for a reason. And as a kid, I kind of paid that off. I'm like, she's just trying to make us feel better. But the older I got, the more I came back to that. And I was like, no, everything does happen for a reason. And that's not to say you sit back and let the world happen to you. I firmly believe that you make your own luck and you make your own success, and you have to work hard and put in the effort, and the world pays you back for that determination. But it does mean that when the door closes, it's usually because there's a different door that you should be going through. And I have found that through my moments of despair, whether they're at university or before or after, it's always led to something that I had needed more in that moment. And it has got me to where I am now, and I wouldn't change that for the world. So I would stick with that, and I would say don't forget that everything does happen for a reason, so work hard but take it in your stride.
Kaylee, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you everyone for listening.
To learn more about careers in the ADF, head to the link in the episode description and join us again soon for more incredible stories on How Did I Get Here?